record to cloud. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic. I'm your host, Timothy Cameron. Put on your emotional seatbelts because today I'm interviewing as my guest, Candace Lightner, president and founder of We Save Lives. She also founded Mothers Against Drunk Driving. But let's step back in time with a brief, but I think dizzying chronology of the road Candace has traversed that brought her into this, I'll call it discipline. In September of 1966, Candace birthed twin daughters, Serena and Carrie Lightner. A drunk driver rear-ended Candace Lightner's car when her daughter Serena was only 18 months old. The crash injured Serena. Serena went on to found Students Against Drunk Driving, SAD. I've spoken for them for quite a few times, by the way. It's now Students Against Destructive Decisions. Candace's third child was Travis Lightner. 6 years after Serena was injured by a drunk driver, Travis was run over by an impaired driver. Travis had many bones broken and other injuries, and he was in a coma and had permanent brain damage. The driver who injured him was impaired by tranquilizers when she ran over him. She also had no license and she got no ticket. Then comes the third triumphant story, Carrie Lightner's story. On May 3rd, 1980, Candace's 13-year-old daughter, Carrie, was walking in her neighborhood in Fair Oaks, California. She is on her way to a church carnival when a drunk driver struck her from behind. He briefly passed out, came to, and drove off after having killed Carrie. The crash threw Carrie's body 125 feet and so badly mutilated her that her body and organs, they couldn't even be donated. As for the drunk driver that committed that crime, he was a chronic DWI offender. He was already free on bail for a hit and run drunk driving crash only 2 days earlier. Killing Carrie was his fifth offense in 4 years. He had many opportunities to turn his life around, but he made a choice to imperil the life of others and, of course, himself by continuing to get behind the wheel of a car while drunk. Mad beginnings. Candace Lightner started MAD in her home on May 7th, 1980. It was 4 days after Carrie's tragedy and a day after Carrie's funeral. Candace's insightful approach was to put, and I love this, human faces on the victims of drunk driving. You know, it's not a statistic. It's not drunk driving. It's drunk victims. Statistics stop being simply a collection of numbers. Instead, each number represented a real human being. The persuasive logic and emotional impact of Candace's message led to a great change in public attitude toward DWIs. Ironically, though, these drunk driving incidents are still happening. In 2013, Candace Lightner founded We Save Lives, which is at wesavelives.org. I'll put that in the information bars along with other websites below this interview. And now she's a tireless advocate for safe roadways, focusing on the 3 Ds: drugged, drunk, and distracted driving. Candace Lightner's ability to empower people to move beyond their grief and make a difference in their community and has earned her state acclaim and national acclaim. Recognizing her years of dynamic leadership, the media voted Candace Lightner as, and I concur with this, one of the most influential American citizens of the 20th century. Her cutting-edge leadership ability has been recognized by the Franklin Covey Leadership Center, the Center for Creative Leadership, and the Columbia Business School's Institute for Personal Leadership. Wow. Candace, welcome to the Incomplete Skeptic. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Do you have any off the top things you would like to say before I go into some of our questions here?
No, not really, except how much snow do you have?
Oh my gosh. Well, I measure it in terms of time. I've spent about an hour and a half just today already on shoveling. So, but it's not that much, but the wind was blowing it everywhere. I'm in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and you said you're in Virginia?
I am, and we got our first major snowstorm in years, actually. And I mean, I haven't been outside except once, but it's actually beautiful. I love snow. I'm sure you probably don't feel the same way I do because you get it far more often and far longer, but it's just really, it's nice. You know, it's just cozy and nice.
I actually love the 4 seasons. There's
Yeah.
times that are difficult because 2 of our seasons are really long, winter and summer.
Right.
And spring and fall are rather short, but we do get all 4, and I love that. So, you know, I remember when I was young walking through the cold. I don't know how old I was, and probably 12, 11, wondering why my mother gave birth to me in this god awful frozen tundra, you know. But, you know, I've changed my attitude since then. I just dress up for it. So now I want to get into something here. I've heard many people say, and I've actually tried to get this idea out in some speeches through the years too, but I've heard people say that if someone killed someone they loved because of drunk driving, they might be capable of committing a homicide, you know?
Do you mean the victim might be capable of committing homicide against the perpetrator or the person that did that?
Yeah, but they might not just be the victim. It could be a loved one of the victim.
But
like you just killed my friend's wife, my friend's daughter, my friend's, you know, and homicide might cross their consciousness, you know. And I've also heard, sorry, I guess I should have been more clear, but I've also heard people say that if they killed someone while driving drunk, they might be capable of suicide. So, you know, obviously sober driving saves lives, but, you know,
so let's go back to the, wait a minute.
Right.
Let's go back to the first thing you said. When I said, you mean the victims, and you said, no, it could be a family member, a loved one. Those are victims too. The victim isn't just the individual who was hit, killed, injured, or whatever. It's the surrounding family, it's the surrounding friends. They all become victims of the same crime. So, and I have come across, and I did when I first started in that, we had a chapter starting in Northern California. And in this particular case, and with this particular family, almost all members of the family were killed. Several of the daughters, cousins, you know, aunts, uncles. It killed 9 people in one car. And they were all members of the same family. So the father of 2, and it crippled another child. So 2 of the daughters that were killed were from this one family, and their other daughter was crippled. And so he, and I'm blanking on his name, but this was a long time ago. The father kept threatening to go and kill. The guy was actually in jail at that time. I don't think we'd gone to court. And so he kept telling his wife, Pat, that Lloyd was his name. He was going to go and kill the driver. And so finally she called me up in a panic one night, and she said, I don't know what to do. He keeps doing this and threatening, and I just don't know what to do. And I said, well, put him on the phone. So I got on the phone. I said, okay, Lloyd, let me ask you something. You're going to do this? And he said, I am. I said, well, would you mind going by the jail first, where Clarence William Bush is, who is the man who killed my daughter, and taking him out first? And then I've got several others you could do at the same time. And there was kind of like silence on the phone. And I was waiting, and he said, oh, I guess I'm not going to do that. And I said, no, I guess not. And so we went on from there, but that was the last time he made that threat. You know, I don't know if you remember this from a long time ago. Let me see. It was a woman, her son raped or killed or molested, or something awful happened to her son. And they were having the trial for the guy who did it. And in the middle of the trial, she went up and shot him with a gun. This is, before a long time ago when you could bring
Yeah,
guns.
I do remember that. Yes.
Yeah. And there was a lot of comparison from the media between her and me at the time about her option, what she chose to do, and my option, what I chose to do. And, but I will tell you, and I don't know if I've discussed this much at all, but when it was in the movie, when they arrested Bush and it looked like they were going to release him, I actually went looking for my gun and with every intention of shooting him. And I couldn't find it. I was hysterical. They did show this scene in the movie. And I was screaming and yelling. And as I later learned, my ex-husband, who knew me well, when this happened, came over and had gotten the gun and taken it home because he was concerned that I might do something like this. And so I didn't have that opportunity. I didn't do it. And, 4 days after her death, I had started MAD. So, and MAD was my reaction. So, and as far as suicide goes, I can tell you that, because, I wrote a book on grief, Giving Sorrow Words, how to cope with grief and get on with your life. We talk about suicide. At one point, I was in so much pain, so much pain. Well, it wasn't just one point, it was throughout, but there was one point that just really, I just couldn't even get out of bed. I couldn't move, etc. And I honestly contemplated suicide, and not because so much as I wanted to see her again, because I actually had after death experiences with her, but because I just wanted to end the pain. So I can understand how someone, after any kind of a tragedy in which they are in just so much, because you're in physical pain along with mental pain, would think in terms of ending their life, not to end their life, but to end the pain, if that makes sense.
Yes. I've met so many people through the years that have different responses, and the victims, I've seen victims that forgave, I've seen victims that didn't. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to do grief. I just personally think that's impossible to define per se, like, well, you should have a timeline. I've even heard people say or write in comment sheets after our speaking, well, geez, you should get over it.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't think there's a timeline for that. And no one else has a right to tell someone how to do their grief, what the timeline should be. I don't know. It seems impossible, but, there was a victim who turned her life into something different than what it used to be, but only after she had a huge breakthrough. She went through hell to get her life back, as have hundreds of people that I've met in MAD, Minnesotans for Safe Driving, and just through the years speaking in different places, right? And but I mean, it didn't destroy you. You're still here. And I think if your husband, your ex-husband, would not have taken that gun out of the house, we wouldn't have MAD today.
Well, probably not. I mean, who knows what I would have done in the end.
I don't know either. Who knows?
But I want to go back and talk about grief for a second when you were
Okay.
talking about people's reactions to it. In the book, I talk about this. And the reason I wrote this book is because after I left MAD, which was about 5.5 years later, I actually started what I consider my sort of active grieving for Carrie. MAD was very good about dealing with my anger and rage, of which I had plenty, but not so good in dealing with my grief. And so I started seeing a therapist to help me grieve. I don't like pain, and grief is pain. So what can I tell you? So I was at the only MAD conference I think I went to after I left until many, 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 many years later. And in fact, I don't even think I went to the conference. I think I went and met with a bunch of MAD people. So we were all sitting there having lunch or dinner or something. And I mentioned something about working with a therapist on my grief. And somebody said to me, well, my God, it's been 5.5 years. And I looked at them and I said, so? And they said, well, isn't that long enough? So actually, that's kind of what prompted me to write my book. to dispel the myths of grieving. So grief, as you know, from the loss of a loved one does not come in 5 stages. That's when you're dying type of stuff. That's such a misconception. In my book, we talk about grief coming in 3 stages: the beginning, the middle, and the rest of your life. And that is reality.
Mhm.
It
Yeah.
just doesn't go away. It may get better, it may get worse, it ebbs and flows. It's like a journey. But the reality is it's there for a lifetime. You learn to adapt, adjust, live with it, and move on. But that's, you know, especially when you lose a child.
So, the woman that was the victim administrator for Ramsey, Washington County here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the surrounding areas. Ramsey is for St. Paul, Minnesota, and Washington County is Stillwater and some other areas around there. And it was the second biggest chapter. Hennepin County was bigger, and that's Minneapolis, Minnesota, for Hennepin. And I had heard a woman speak at a 12-step group when I was 90 days clean, who was, they said she's from MAD. And I don't know if you ever heard of her, Mary Jo Robinson. She's passed away. But she had become my sponsor in recovery for a while. But when they put her name up on the board and said Mary Jo Robinson, MAD speaker, at a recovery recognition night, you know, it was a pin night where we recognize each other for our sobriety. And I thought that somebody must have been hitting a crack pipe or something to have a MAD speaker coming and talking to us at a place where we're trying to celebrate recovery, not get dragged through the mire of hearing about someone losing a loved one and the like. And I was experiencing what I call contempt prior to investigation. I thought I knew something about her, and I had never heard her utter a single word, you know. And I think that's where there's a misconception out in society that, you know, mad mothers and people are just releasing their rage on people and they're victimizing people. There's people that really feel like they're victims because they have to hear about these kinds of stories. I was playing that tape, you see, and I had no idea that I was prejudiced against her for no reason. And I had my arms crossed, you know, when she showed up to speak, and I was like, let's get this over with, you know, what is she doing here? And she introduced herself. She said, well, hi, I'm Mary Jo Robinson. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic, sober 21 or 22 years by the grace of God. And she did that little spiel thing, you know. And I thought, oh, geez, she's in recovery. I never guessed that. And yeah, she talked about her son who was killed. And, you know, and she said it was at that time, I think the most difficult pain she had ever experienced in her life. She loved her son. But she said she had made a choice to forgive the person that killed him, whether or not he wanted it. It wasn't about him necessarily. But, you know, we can kill each other with just a few words. And this guy was very remorseful. And she went into the courtroom and wanted eye contact with him. He wouldn't look at her. He was looking at the ground. And he might have been one of those people that were so he had his own type of grief. He might have been suicidal, and I think he might have been. You know, anyone who has a heart, how could you not be suicidal or else have mental illness issues to where you can't feel that pain? You know, and but we can kill each other with just a few words in the right place and the right time. You know, and she actually broke a rule. She crossed the courtroom floor and approached him and says, when I give you my victim impact statement, I just would like for you to look me in the eyes. And he just still wouldn't do it. So she reached out and she placed her hand underneath his chin and, you know, asked him again, would you please look me in the eyes? And this time he allowed it, and she raised up his face and they looked at each other in the eyes, and she said, I want you to know something. I want you to know that I love you and I forgive you for killing my son. And the kid broke down crying, and she hugged him in the courtroom and said those words over and over again. You know, he had holy water shooting out of his face, if you will. And that's not a religious statement. It's just how I view things. Some people might be offended that I even use that term. But, you know, that was her choice to do. And she said, one, she said, I'm a Christian and I'm in recovery, both teach forgiveness, and anyone can forgive. An atheist, forgiveness is for everybody if they want it. It's a choice. But she said, you know, she said, if someone wants to get well, we got to let him. And he turned his life around. And I think that probably maybe helped, who knows? But I've seen for every story of a drunk driver who turned their lives around, I have 20 where they didn't, or more. And so this is very much an exception, it seems to me. Usually people have 3, 4, 5 drunk driving incidences in their lifetime. And what are we doing here? I mean, you know, I've been speaking not as long as you, but for 32 years now, and I'm still seeing drunk driving going on just as if we've never said a word. But yet I've had people come back and say, you saved my life. So we're saving lives. And that's why I love We Save Lives. The focus is on saving lives. But do you ever get the feeling like, what are we doing here? Is this doing any good? You know, in the grief and the lack of remorse among people. And I spent the last 2 weeks, I spent countless hours watching the cases of DWI offenders who are being sentenced for greater and greater amounts of time because it's getting, people are taking it a lot more serious than they used to. And, but it's still not stopping drinking and driving. There's something missing in this dynamic. You know, what do you think about all that? I know it's a big question because I covered a lot of ground.
You did. So going back to forgiveness, I did a documentary in Japan, or for the Japanese, years ago. And they told me, and I don't know if this is still accurate, that drunk drivers who are imprisoned have to get up every morning and pray to Buddha and ask forgiveness for what they did, and then ask forgiveness from the victims that they killed or injured, from their families, and that they have to do this every morning, which I thought was absolutely wonderful, that every day they have to seek atonement for their actions. I can tell you that I don't believe in the concept of forgiveness. I did not forgive and do not forgive Clarence William Bush. And had I done so, I never would have started MAD. Moving on to your comment about what are we doing here. It's ironic. When I was doing MAD was a much different organization then. It was much more passionate and full of activism and commitment and volunteers. And it wasn't all about raising money. It was really like a big major campaign. So, and because we had such a forceful impact on the country in such a short period of time, we were able to reap the benefits of what we were doing fairly quickly, within 3 years. So my attitude then was, every time we succeeded in, passing a bill or whatever it is that we were doing, you know, outreach, education, etc., I would see a difference. I tell this story so many times, but it's true. When I first started, we were doing nothing but radio interviews because nobody would have us on TV, have me on TV at the time, because, you know, I was so new and green and whatever. And so you have to kind of go through a period of testing, believe it or not. And so I was doing a radio show one night and I was talking about Carrie and my story and the usual. And so afterwards, my phone rang. This is when I was still working out of my home, and my phone rang, and it was a woman who told me that they were, their kids all played softball. They were in a league. And so every week they would pick up, these families would go pick up their kids. They would all go meet at this local pizza place that I knew. And the parents would order pitchers of beer and the kids would have pizza and lemonade. She said it was so funny because they had 2 or 3 carloads, going over to the same place. And when they got to the pizza place and the waitress came to take their order, she said, everybody started looking at everybody and they all ordered lemonade for the adults as well as the children. And somebody said, I just listened to that woman on the radio, and they were all going, and so did we, and so did we. So they had made the decision right then and there. They were no longer going to be ordering beer and pizza for the adults, especially with these children in the car. And that happened within a few months. And I was like, whoa, people are listening, and obviously we're making a difference. All right, so time passes. And, I move on, I write a book, I do other things. And then I come back more active in the movement. And first as a consultant and then doing We Save Lives. Now I see, because I'm frustrated that, to be honest with you, I don't think MAD is doing nearly enough and nearly what they are capable of doing to stop this problem. But I see things happen and people being killed. And now I feel like, oh my God, what are we doing? Where did all this work go? And why am I doing all this with We Save Lives? And I actually feel almost guilty in a way that maybe I didn't do enough or I could have done more. I think that's probably the problem of being an activist, to be honest with you, versus a bureaucracy. But I do. So I understand where you're coming from. And it's like, what more could I have done to reach these people? What more can I say? What more can I do to convince them that they're making dangerous, stupid, irresponsible, and selfish driving choices that they don't have to make? This is such a solvable problem. And I have my campaigns with We Save Lives, and I do that and hope for the best. I don't have the bandwidth that many large organizations do. So my campaigns don't reach as many people, unfortunately, but I happen to think they're pretty good. So, I just kind of keep plugging along and doing what I'm doing and hoping people will listen.
Perfect. I like that we can have conversations, you and I, about forgiveness and have different perspectives. And that's just how it is. I like it how you just say it the way you feel it. And that's perfect. And I've spoken with other speakers in MAD who have said the same thing. I'll never forgive. And
I think you're talking to people who believe in the concept. I don't. To me, forgiveness is not my role in life. If there is a God, it's God's role, or the supreme beings, or her role, or whatever, but it's not my role. So it's just a concept that I don't believe in, I don't do, I don't practice. And I've had some people say, well, are you still angry? Well, yeah, I get angry at times. Absolutely. And that's me. And I'm a very passionate person. And to me, it's that passion and anger that succeeded so well with MAD. And so, if I'd been sitting up there saying, oh, Clarence William Bush, I just forgive you, and then tried to convince the public that this was a serious crime, I'm sorry, it just wouldn't have worked. So, and I didn't feel that way either. I mean, this was, we're dealing with a man who was a criminal abuser of the drug alcohol. I know many alcoholics who did not drink and drive. They drank, but they didn't drive. And this is somebody who made the choice to do it over and over and over again. So
I had never heard the term criminal abuser of alcohol, although it does have some, I'm going to have to chew on that one for a while. The thing about choice, I know you focus on choice, and I do too. And it's my perspective is that I know there's a model out there calling alcoholism a disease. And personally, I don't really think I can subscribe to that. It's just not realistic. Now, that's just my take on it. I'm not judging anyone who believes it. Believe what you will, and but I think we always have a choice in how we access that choice, however brief it is. I think the universe, God, our lives, don't care how you see it, but the choice always comes up where we have a second. Our conscience is going, what you're doing right there is a mistake. Don't do it. You know, it's like people that it occurs to them to say, well, I'm not an alcoholic. Well, why did that occur to you? You know, well, maybe I shouldn't get in this car. Is it really right to do this? It's like, I've had a lot to drink tonight, or I'm not feeling quite right. Or, you know, there's something that comes up in us when we're looking at someone and we're upset and we want to say something and we just blurt it out. You know, we just vomit our pain on somebody rather than constructively utilize the anger to direct it in a way that's meaningful for change, you know, and, you know, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean, you know, and so but that opportunity is always there. The choice is always there. So I just have to say that we do have a choice. Even the criminal abusing of alcohol, there is a brief chance there to do something different
Well, they
every
can make the
time.
choice. They can make the choice, Timothy, before they go out.
Mhm.
They can make that choice while they're still sober, because people do sober up.
Right. That's
And they
right.
can make those decisions and choices. I mean, I've had friends, unfortunately, who are alcoholic, and they've said to me, I know I drink, I know I'm a drunk, and I'm not driving, you know, and they don't, you know, they take taxis or they stay home and drink or whatever. So the people, and I do believe they are criminal abusers of the drug alcohol, the people that make these choices, they know exactly what they're doing. And they know that they at one time could have made the choice not to go out, not to drink, or not to drive, you know, alcoholic drink, but they can make that choice and decisions. I mean, it always boggles my mind, especially when I see celebrities who have tons of money and, you know, have chauffeur-driven limousines that get arrested for drunk driving. And I'm like, what? You have so many choices of sober rides there and sober rides home, and you can afford them, you know, and here you turn around and make these stupid, dangerous decisions and choices. It is a choice. And I don't think we can overemphasize that. I don't want to hear the excuse, which, you know, if you, and I'm sure you've done this. I mean, I used to do court monitoring and started the court monitoring program in the early days of MAD. And, you know, I used to sit there and I'd hear defense attorneys say, but he was drunk. In fact, in my particular case, we were probably one of the first cases that really went to court in a major way because of what I was doing. And I wanted the man to be charged with, there's mitigating circumstances and aggravating circumstances. And I wanted them to add aggravating circumstances onto his charges. So he would get a longer punishment. And in those days, nobody was going to prison, nobody was going to jail, you know, it was just not done.
Right.
So, you know, we were hoping for the best. And so as far as we know, by the way, he's the only second person in the country that was actually in prison for felony drunk driving. Anyway, so what happened though is the defense attorney turned around and said, well, the fact that he's an alcoholic is a mitigating circumstance, which the judge bought and agreed with. And therefore he got a lesser sentence because, quote, talk about enabling, because he was an alcoholic. So, you know.
Was he sentenced to treatment or anything?
No, he was sentenced to a halfway house where he could still have his car and drive to and from work during the week and go home on the weekends. And he still has driver's license. And so, and by the way, I have I hear people now and on Facebook complaining because their drivers only got 10 years or 12 years or 8 years or whatever. And I think you don't know how lucky you are, seriously. And he wouldn't have gotten that if it hadn't been for me starting MAD and being in the news constantly. He wouldn't have even gotten that, believe me, wouldn't have. When I found out, which he was halfway through his halfway house time, that he still could drive and drive home on the weekends, I raised so much hell in the press, and that he still had a driver's license, that the legislature on their own introduced a bill that I think at the time they called Kerry's Law. I'm not sure.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah,
I'm
and
not sure
without
either, but
my
it sounds
help,
right.
that would then take away his license because he had more than 3 and sort of made it automatic that after 3 drunk driving, your license is removed. So his license was suspended. Well, ironically, the day he was released, or the day after, it was the day he was released, he got his driver's license back. And he hit another girl, the same age as my daughter would have been had she lived, within a mile of where he killed my daughter. And her name was Carrie.
Under
And he
the
was
influence
drunk.
too? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He had I think over a 0.2 OBAC.
You see, this is what's so crazy about your story is you had these 3 things. I called it the triumvirate. You had these 3 huge things, and then he hit someone else named Carrie. I mean, this is like a wake-up call for everybody. It's like, how can you deny how important this is? So what happened to him after that?
He was taken off. His probation was rescinded or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
He went back to, I think, he never went to prison, so I think a halfway house. But he transferred over to Kenosha, Wisconsin, which was his home. And while there, he also violated probation. And in fact, I was called by the media and I said, do you want this man driving around in your neighborhood? And then in, I think it was 1992, who's a famous newscaster? I absolutely love him, good looking guy. He's since retired.
Brian Williams?
Possibly, or the other one, John, the one who's retired.
Yeah, Brian Williams just retired, but no,
this one retired before that. Oh, you would know him. And sorry, he had a major he was like a major newscaster. They decided to do a story on Bush.
Cronkite?
So, no. Oh, he'd kill me if he ever found out I couldn't remember his name because I talked to him. But anyway, so they followed him around. They went to Kenosha sort of undercover and followed him around. And they said the whole time they followed him, he never drove. People picked him up or he took the bus. And that was the last I heard. And I have no clue since then. You know, when I was really visible, I used to get updates and, media would contact me or whatever. But since I'm not, I don't, and whatever, I have not heard. So I don't even know if he's dead or alive, to be honest with you.
Okay, yeah, I was curious, and I thought about looking him up, but I don't know. Just to see if there was some history on it, but just figure I'd talk with you directly about everything. I did see the Wikipedia link that you informed me is yours. I thought it was Wikipedia itself. And I don't like Wikipedia, so I did not open that one because I thought it was them. I didn't realize it was yours, or I would have opened it.
Yeah, no, they kicked me off. They said I wasn't important enough. That's what they said. I wasn't important enough, so they kicked me off. So I just did my own Wikipedia. We tried to get me back on, and they were making it so difficult. I said, screw it. So I did my own Wikipedia page on my personal website, CandaceLightner.com.
Perfect. Now, I did some explorations on WeSaveLives.org. What's the difference between the 2 websites?
Which 2?
Well, the CandaceLightner.com.
Oh, well, CandaceLightner.com is all about me, obviously.
Okay,
my speaking engagements, my sizzle reel media, my book, whatever. And eventually we'll kind of co-host my masterclass. I'm doing a masterclass for the Mentor Institute on activism, on becoming a successful activist, etc.
When is that?
Who knows?
Oh, okay.
I've got it about halfway done, so it's a lot of work. And then We Save Lives is all about We Save Lives. It's about drunk, drugged, and distracted driving. Plus we unfortunately highlight. It's unfortunate that we have victims to highlight. We highlight other victim stories, and we have our campaigns, but not while driving, which is one of my all-time favorites for distracted driving, in which we encourage everyone to add but not while driving to their hashtag, but not while driving, to their mobile device signature, to let people who contact them know that they don't text and drive, they won't respond while they're driving, and that distracted driving is socially unacceptable.
What's this textilizer thing?
Yeah, I
I,
knew
I
you
saw it on
suggested
your
that.
blog. Yeah.
I'm, yeah, that's not ours. That belongs to another group. That's one of our partners that I'm blanking on because I'm
Yeah.
so old. And he actually, Ben Lieberman, his son was killed by a distracted driver. And Ben has been very instrumental in trying to get the textilizer used and adapted. And somehow, so I'm full disclosure, I don't understand technology, gang, so don't run around and quote me.
Okay.
Somehow law officers can use this device to find out if you've just texted, I guess, or something while you were driving when you're in a crash. And you'd have to probably look it up and get a better
Okay.
definition. And we
Yeah,
support
I'll do
that.
some research.
Great. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I've known quite a few people that have lost people because of impaired driving, which I think distracted driving is an impairment. You are impaired. You might as well be sticking a needle in your arm when you're looking down at your phone and you're operating the vehicle. I mean, I'm sorry, I don't differentiate between the three things where, I understand we're all going to get distracted. That's human nature, but we can keep our eyes on the road. We can do things to be safe. And, you'll see something move suddenly to the side of the road that you have to take your eyes off of. You see something moving, is it a deer? You have to look, so you're going to get distracted from what's right in front of you. And, something happens in the car, you spill or something, but the phone in your hand, looking down and texting, I'm sorry, there's nothing in me that says that's okay. And my friend lost his son because of that, and he's as dead as if you went out and took a gun and shot him in a robbery or something. What's the difference?
Well, the difference is there is a difference between distracted and drunk driving. Drunk driving normally occurs. Sorry, I had this turned off. So hang on while I turn it off.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just quickly say is with the alcohol, you can't, the phone, you can throw it out.
Okay, let me go back to my point.
Get out of your system.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So the difference is drunk driving normally occurs at night and on the weekends. Distracted driving occurs every hour of the day. So you are at risk of being hit by a distracted driver 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Whereas with drunk driving, it's mainly late at night, 1 or 2 in the morning.
I didn't realize, I mean, it makes sense, but that for some reason didn't cross my mind.
Yeah,
wow.
And also using a Bluetooth is just as dangerous as driving with a 0.08 blood alcohol content. So people that run around thinking they're being safe because they have a Bluetooth aren't. Absolutely not. And I honestly, of course, we've all
what's a Bluetooth?
Oh, one of those devices in your car that you link up and you can talk to somebody through voice stuff. You're not holding a phone up, or you might have an earpiece in.
I see.
Whatever, that's a Bluetooth. And so
got it.
And I'm honestly coming to the conclusion that phones are addictive, that people, just like alcohol or anything else, or they just can't, did you see that little cartoon that I posted on my Facebook page the other day?
I don't think so. I'm not sure. I might have, my memory isn't the best either.
Yeah. So it's 2 parents standing over the crib of their darling little baby. And the father says, gee, I wish his first word hadn't been texted. And
yes,
the baby is holding a cell phone. And to me, that's the future. I mean, that's the direction we're going in. And that's, what's happening in this world. People just can't get off their cell phones long enough to enjoy life, frankly. I have a whole soapbox about that. But anyway, so.
I want to interject something here. This was such a good idea. I don't want this to escape the attention of the listeners, because everyone should think about this. When you, your phone sent me a message that said, I'm driving, but I'm not texting. it was an automated thing where your phone was down. You were moving in the car, your phone was down, and it automated sent the message.
And
I
you can
love it.
do that.
You
Yeah,
know?
we
Yeah,
we
and there's a
actually
friend of mine that does that too, but I
we did a
want the
petition
word
drive.
out there.
We did a petition drive to Apple asking them to add it's like the airplane mode function onto phones for cars.
Mhm.
And they did. And we had the petition going for maybe a year, 6 months to a year, and they turned around and did. So you can go on your, and I'm sure you can do it on Android, but I don't know Android, I just know iPhones, but you can go to your iPhone and you have that option to turn it on. And what's really great about it is, for example, I don't own a car anymore and I rarely drive. I don't know if you know this, but I have a broken back from a distracted driver. So
I did not know that.
yeah,
Wow.
so driving isn't a high priority for me. So a lot of times I'm in a car with somebody else and they're driving and I'll go to text or whatever. And my phone will pop up and say, you can't text, you're driving. And so I have to go, no, I'm not, and let it know I'm not. And then it will let me do that. But it also has a way of somehow, if it's an emergency, still alerting you. I mean, how many people truly get emergencies while they're driving? I just don't buy that people do, frankly. But if it's an emergency, I think there's a way that it can still notify you. But it's just so terrific because it right away, and I've only, in all the calls and all the stuff I've made and all the work that I do with activists, I think, or advocates, I think I've only seen it come up on maybe 2 other people's phones, that they'll come back and say, blah, blah, I'm driving. And I think, hooray. But I'm thinking, why isn't everybody doing this?
Mm-hmm. It's been some years and I don't remember exactly how I did this, but it was I have an Android and I had to set it up, but to where it won't allow certain things to happen while I'm driving. And you can take permissions away. So I know that the options are out there. I need to go back in and research this more.
Go into your settings.
Yeah. Okay.
On your phone. And it should be an option in settings on your phone. And it could be called airplane mode, but I think on mine it's called drive mode. And then you just turn it on. Let's see if, but airplane mode also works too. But let me see if, do you have an iPhone or an Android?
I have an Android.
Well, probably not going to be helpful at all, but anyway, go into your settings and then it should be
Notifications, sounds, vibrations.
Is there something that says airplane mode or drive mode?
Oh, I can put it on airplane mode, but let me ask you this. Now, I listen to my GPS. It goes over the speaker of my car.
Yeah, same here.
And if I put it on airplane mode, I won't be able to do that.
Okay, well, I do the few times that I do drive. Okay, so mine is airplane mode. Oh, it's, I think, called do not disturb. Look and see if you have a
I have do not disturb. Yeah, I leave that on when I'm driving. Yeah.
Okay. Let me see if it says what it says. Always while iPhone is locked, do not disturb, silence calls and notifications. Yeah,
I put it on do not disturb
and it says
this interview too.
Okay, well, it should say do not disturb while driving. Mine says do not disturb while driving. So anyway, check that out and see if that's it.
Okay, I don't
put mine on do not disturb while we were doing this. Oh, well, I just turned it off. Let me turn it off again.
I just realized that you had mentioned something earlier, and if I would have had quick enough wit, I wouldn't have mentioned it. It's not like we're driving, but it's like, oh no, she mentioned that and I just said something about it. No, I wasn't making a point there, So, but I wanted to get the message out there, folks. There is a way to drive without distractions. And whatever it is, it only takes a little bit of preparation before we get on the road, make sure it's like cops before they get on the road, they make sure everything works. I did some Ubering for a while. I did it for a couple of years before I had cancer. And I was really glad to keep people from driving under the influence. And I had more people that'd be in the back of my car saying, I'm so glad that we have Uber now, because I can go out and party and not have to drive home, you know?
Well, they've had taxis all along, so they could
Oh,
have.
well, that's true too. That's right. That's right. You know, so, but I just felt like I was part of the solution, and I didn't want to drive a taxi. You know, I was okay with Ubering for a while. Not, I don't do it now, but just the good feedback I was getting about people are viewing it as important enough to mention it when you're picking them up from a bar, and they made a choice to not get behind the wheel under the influence. And they proved it because they're in my car and I'm driving them home. So, you know, people do have a choice, but I think they have to make that choice while they're sober, especially. You know, it's like, don't wait to make the choice after you've been pounding down a few beers or something. And I personally think any alcohol in the bloodstream while if you're going to drive, that's a mistake. I don't care if it's one beer. I know it's legally, you're not prevented from that. And I know a lot of people in MAD and other organizations that said, well, I have a beer with my dinner, or I mean, a glass of wine with my dinner or something. Me, I say, don't do it. Because everyone reacts to alcohol differently, and one person will react differently one day to the next. Your physiology is always changing. And I just think it's way too risky. What's it going to hurt you to not have a glass of wine if you're going to get behind the wheel? It's a hard sell. Why are people in MAD saying, this is okay? You know, I'm not going to sit and argue with them over it. But what do you think? Is it about having a glass of wine or a beer before you go drive?
I don't have any real problems with that. I think, and I do. Well, I don't drive anymore hardly at all, but back in the day, I would have maybe a glass of wine with my meal. I've never been much of a drinker though. So I think this is, and we used to say this years ago, know your limit. You know, you should know that you can tolerate or not tolerate a glass of wine with dinner and still be sober enough to drive. You should know that. If you don't know that, don't drink at all. I think, Timothy, sometimes if you get on the bandwagon, or at least this is what I believed when I was doing MAD, if I got on the bandwagon of saying no alcohol at all when you drive, nobody would have paid attention. We wouldn't have been as successful as we were. So I felt that we had to be reasonable and, you know, logical. And I will go in the car with somebody who's had one drink and dinner and they're driving, and I feel real comfortable with that because I know them and trust them. So, but you're right. There are some people that shouldn't have any alcohol. I don't care how big their meal is, because of how they react. And people know that. They really do. But I'll tell you something, denial is a wonderful thing. You know, it's just a wonderful thing. And people love to deny. But frankly, I truly believe that everybody does know their limit.
Yeah, you know, when I said that, I just want to reiterate it. It's just my personal opinion. I don't say this in speeches. I don't think it's a relevant point worth making a fuss over. But I sometimes will quote some studies that have been done with law enforcement where, you know, do you remember the case, the first one I think made a lot of media, where they would give law enforcement, they were cops, judges, lawyers, court reporters, etc. It just happened to be that community that they were focusing on. And they would administer one shot to each person of alcohol or a beer or something. And then they would wait a specific amount of time. I don't remember, it was a half hour or what. They'd give them a PBT, come up with the blood alcohol content, and ask them specific questions. And then when they got to 0.04, generally when they got 0.04s, they would ask them, do you think you're okay to drink and drive? And they would say, absolutely not. I've just had, you know, but here's the thing, is when some of them got to 0.08, they were saying, I'm okay. I can do this, you know. And it's like, oh my God, you know, you change your mind between 0.04 and 0.08. To me, the point is, the real point, not the 0.08, is make up your mind before you hit the road, and know your limitations is reasonable. I've gotten in a car with people that I don't drink, so, you know, that's not an issue for me. But I've gotten in the car with people that do drink, and they've had a drink with their meal or something. I'm very sensitive to changes in behavior, and I didn't sense any problems with them, you know? And so I'm not a prohibitionist, nor do I think we should be one. A person can be able to live their life however they want to. Just don't put yourself and others at risk with those decisions. You know, I guess that's what I would want people to hear. What do you do with a person that, I mean, I know you've already talked about this a bit with the grief, and maybe this isn't asked and answered, but if a person is really stuck, I mean, just really stuck, and they're so, you know, it's like someone they loved has been hit, and 20 years later, they're still not driving because they're so terrified that they're going to get hit, you know. And it can be any type of trauma, not just this. I'm not picking on this particular thing. You know, sometimes people have been raped and they won't touch another human being as a result. You know, I'm not judging this, but I've seen, it's like, okay, a woman I know was raped. She was abused as a child, raped as a young adult female, and she was going into the graduate program at Hazelden. And I worked at Hazelden for about 4 years. And she was in tears almost every time I saw her in the cafeteria, you know. And I just finally asked her what's going on. And she says, well, they told me that I have to address my trauma before I can move into a setting working with other women who have been abused like I was. I have to deal with my own. And it's feels almost impossible, but she was navigating through it. But she felt really stuck, you know. What do you do with that? How do you know, can you get behind the wheel again? Can you function again? Can you have a good life? I mean, you're having a good life, right? Even though you've had all these things happen, and the effects are real and they might be burdensome, but you're high functioning, right?
No, I'm not.
Yeah.
The
You're
reason
not.
I
Why?
don't, no, the
Oh,
reason I don't drive is because I have PTSD.
then I asked the right question, didn't I?
Well, I mean,
Perfect. Okay.
yeah, I saw the woman hit me. I thought I was going to die. I mean, I did. I spoke to my daughter and said, I'm going to join you much sooner than I thought I would. And she totaled both of our cars. And so I think, and then I've had a son, as you know, that's been run over and suffered permanent injuries. And I had a daughter killed. So do I like cars? I don't. Do I like driving? I don't. Do I have PTSD issues? I absolutely do, which is why every once in a while I will drive. I have a friend that will lend me her car when she travels, but I might drive just around in the neighborhood. I don't drive at night. I go get my stuff and come home.
Got it.
And if I ever win the lottery or ever have a lot of money, I'm going to hire a chauffeur. So anything with them, you let that person deal with it however they want to deal with it, you know, through therapy or support groups, or I don't feel that I need to address mine with a therapist because I'm at an age where it just isn't incapacitating me in my future or in what I do, because I don't need to drive for a living and live in an area where taxis and buses are plentiful. I won't take Uber and Lyft, but you know, I can get around. So, you know, I deal with mine fine, actually.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
and I'm not
I
a
guess
therapist.
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so I can't address the situation. I'm sure she addressed therapy, you know, which is what you should do with Steve.
Yeah. I guess the high functioning might not have been the right phraseology. I'm not a psychiatrist. I was just in the field of chemical dependency, but or a psychologist or anything. But, you know, I had PTSD around many things in my life, and it still affects me, but nothing like it used to. So I've made a lot of progress. I used to be incapacitated, and now I'm not, you know. And I won't describe what got me through it. I think it's different for everybody. You know, repeated exposure was part of it, but like just a lot of things. But you know, I think for the first I don't want to make this story about me, but you know, there's a period of time where I would be driving, and if I saw a woman pushing a stroller, I'd have to pull my car over and just sit and cry, you know. And it took years to be able to see. It's like I'm wondering if I could even drive and see a woman pushing a baby in a stroller. And it did take about a decade to where, you know, I could see a woman pushing a stroller, and what happened in my heart and conscience and everything was far different over time to where I could function, you know. And I used to speak a lot with this one particular woman who lost her son. And she and her husband, you know, her husband got the news, and she said when she heard the sound that came out of her husband's voice, you know, the keening sound, that they had lost their son, it was something she had never heard in her entire life, especially from him. And you know, and it just totally decimated their lives. And she said that she lost almost all of her friends because they wanted to shy away from them, as they didn't know what to say or do. And all she wanted them to do is just be there. They didn't have to fix anything. They didn't have to do anything per se. She just wanted them to stay her friends. So there's a lot of things that happened to her through the years. And we used to go to a lot of high schools, you know, and back in the day, we hit almost every high school, you know how those things go in our areas. And we were speaking to offenders that were released from prison. And I can't remember the name of the place now because it's been 15 years maybe. And they were like being put into a work release setting, but it was high structure, high accountability. They're really watching them, and everything they do is monitored and controlled. And after we got done speaking, you know, we were talking about grief, and I thought, you know, your grief, Sue, is so much worse than mine. You know, my grief could never compare to your grief. You know, you lost someone you loved, and I didn't lose someone I loved. I caused the death of someone else loved. And while I have grief for that, while it's like I took a life and I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing something about that, it's different. And she said, Timothy, grief ain't a contest.
Right. Grief is grief.
Right. And, you know, and I, you know, I did have a hard time wrapping my mind around that, but there's this process. It's like we're trying to save lives here. And I want people to avoid ever having to even be faced with these things. And if people are driving sober, there's going to be no regrets about getting into a car and feeling safe in our society. We should be able to do that, is to walk out of our houses and feel safe and feel like we're in community and we love each other and we care about each other and we hold each other in such high esteem that we would never deliberately do something to harm another human being, you know? And I'm not saying to be perfect, but it's like, I've heard people say, I didn't mean to do this. I didn't mean to drive under the influence and hurt someone. I tell them, I think you should have meant to not do it. So yeah, you didn't mean to, but you should have meant not to. So there's a mindset there where if you just rotate the whole thing, you can raise people's awareness and consciousness, which is what I'm hoping activism does. But we access their hearts, you know, because if you don't get their heart, you can talk to the mind all day long, you know, and you can tell them how many people die every year from driving. You can throw out all the math and everything, but the intellect never goes far enough, and I don't know if you agree with that, but we need to have a composite balance between the heart and the mind. I think the mind is there to protect the heart, and the heart is our intuition and our conscience, and our reason for living is in the heart. It's not just in the mind, and people just poo-poo the heart sometimes. They say, feeling isn't a fact. That's why I'm sorry, love is a feeling and love is a great fact. And people talk about overthinking, like I'm guilty of doing, maybe even right now. But but I just want to activate the heart and the mind when I'm talking to people. It's like, if you can touch their hearts, you got a chance. If you can open their heart, you got a chance of making some progress. See where I'm going with that?
Sort of.
Yeah, maybe I'm a cockeyed optimist. I don't know.
No, I don't ever sit down and think about mind and heart when I'm people. I just don't put that into the equation. I think it's of common sense, practicality, because I do ignored common far too long. And a lot of times, if you just think in a common sense manner, you'll act differently, frankly. So go into all that depth. That's just not me. So I'll let you do that.
Sure.
I just go and say what I have to say. And I'm very logical. I think in terms of logic and how to out-logic people that give me excuses. I don't believe in enabling, and I think most of us enable, and I am not an enabler. And so my approach is logical, don't enable, common sense, whatever.
Cool. For some reason, your voice is starting to break up just a little bit here.
Yeah, and I'm getting a thing, although it's gone, that said my internet was unstable, and so unfortunately where I live. So that might be why. Is that better?
Yeah, it's starting to
me
stabilize.
Sign.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to do about it. Not logically inclined. I'm actually technically impaired. So
yeah, we got to bring in the young people for this.
Yeah, I keep telling my daughter-in-law, she just let my grandson live with me for a year, learn all this stuff, get caught up and know how to do TikTok and the whole bit.
Well, I understand. I'm going to get ready to close this off because we don't want to lose any of your audio anymore. But now, what is it, the campaign that you're launching end of January?
Yeah, we are actually. And so one of our campaigns that we have ongoing is called the Courage to Intervene Promise. And I love it. It's my favorite program that We Save Lives does. And it's where passengers or friends of drivers will sign a promise that says, I agree to intervene when somebody's going to drive drunk, as long as it doesn't endanger my life, or I agree not to get in the car, whatever. The campaign that we're launching in the end of January focuses on the promise, focuses on passengers, and we want the last week of January declared National Passenger Safety Week, because deaths are not down. What we're doing hasn't been working all that great, and I feel this is something that I've had a dream about doing for over a year, and thank National Road Safety Foundation also and agreed to partner with me on this. I could never have gotten it off the ground, but now we've got a ton of organizations that will be backing this and supporting this, that if you can impact a passenger and empower them to speak up, to save their own life and to realize their lives are worth saving, we can probably cut deaths and injuries in half easily. When you look at the numbers of 25% of the passengers that die, et cetera, believe me, they have the biggest impact, I think, on people driving and making dangerous, stupid, reckless driving choices. If people won't drive with you anymore because you use your cell phone, you're going to quit using your cell phone. If people say to you, it isn't cool to drink and drive, so we're going to find another way home, or I'm not getting in the car with you, chances are you will do that. Not always. And the same with drug driving. Those are my three focuses, but it's true of drowsy driving, speeders, wearing seatbelts. I won't get in the car with people who do not buckle up. So trust me, when I get in the car with somebody, they buckle up. I won't get in the car with somebody who drives distracted. So, and my friends do, but when they're with me, they don't. So we just have to make it clear to people, the drivers, what our ground rules are. My life is valuable. It's important. I want it to be saved. I'm sure that you, the driver, keep that in mind while you're driving. Your life is also valuable to me. I love you, so I want you to save your life too. So we'll be announcing that in a couple of, I'm getting ready to do some videos, and we're going to be sending out press releases, and we're signing up organizations, and super excited. And I'm hoping that we're getting resolutions in Congress and the state legislatures that it eventually will become a thing like National Impaired Driving Month is. I would like to see this, and we just are asking for the last week in January, which is the only week, by the way, that doesn't have a traffic safety theme. And so this is the week that we've decided that we want to declare National Passenger Safety Week. And this to me would be a major legacy for me if we can succeed in this. And I love We Save Lives, and I love my Sorrow Words. I think it's a wonderful book on grieving, but this to me will be a life-saving campaign that I think will really have far-reaching consequences. So
I'll do everything I can from my end to help promote this and get the word out. And the links below the recording that we're making now, I'll be putting your book links and things like that, and make sure everyone has access to what they need to find everything we've talked about. And
I will send you the press release. Release it with the links on there too. We'll have a new website, etc. And I will send you. And then right now, though, they can go to We Save Lives and sign the Courage to Intervene promise.
Okay, we'll make sure that gets out there as much as possible. Okay. I want to thank you again, Candace, for being on the show, The Incomplete Skeptic, and giving voice to the marginalized. And I really think some people think that we've lost our minds when we're trying to make a difference. And the truth is, I'm just really trying to make a better world. And thank you for everything that you've done. And your work, I think, has helped save my life and the life of many people. So,
thank you, Timothy.
I'm one of them, and very thankful for you. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to The Incomplete Skeptic. And please help Candace as much as you can. All right, guys. Peace out.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.